Hello and welcome to Misaal. My name is Zahed and I'm your host. On this podcast, I talk candidly with the most innovative minds working towards building a better startup economy in Pakistan. In this episode of the Misaal podcast, I talk to Yasir Ilyas. He's the head of Hysab Kytab, a personal finance app that lets you track expenses, prepare budgets, set saving goals, and view reports of your financial activities. We discuss his motivation to return to Pakistan and lead Hysab Kytab, scaling both a consumer and business white label product in the current economic environment, and combining the dynamism of a startup with the maturity of a larger organization. Let's listen in. Welcome to the Misaal podcast, Yasir. How are you?
Good, Zahid. How are you?
I am doing very well. I first discovered Hysab Kytab like a few months back. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? How did you end up working at Hysab Kytab, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
After I completed my high school, I migrated to US. I was living in New York, and I did my high school, my bachelor's from there. Then I started my career with IBM. I worked for IBM for 5 years. Then I moved to Ernst & Young, that also in New York. Worked there for 3 years. Then I felt like having a global experience, for which I went to the Middle East, worked for KPMG for 5 years, had my own venture for 3+ years, and then moved to IKEA for 3 years. Around that time, there was an urge to do something, for a Pakistani market, and I felt like the only true global brand that we have been able to produce as Pakistan is Shan Masala. So wherever you go,
Yes.
wherever
agree.
you are, you would find that to be the case. So the whole idea for me was to move back to Pakistan and do something in terms of a productive thing coming out of Pakistan, because there are a lot of bad media that Pakistan gets. So while searching for the right partner, I came across, I knew Waqar Islam, who was the CEO and founder of Hesab Kytab back then. And he's also the CEO and director for JBS. So professionally, I knew him only. So we had different discussions. And then this idea of working or taking Hesab Kytab to the next level came up. And I personally opted for it. I had to take a financial cut, if you will, big time. But this is more of a passion than anything else. So moved back to Pakistan in December 2018. Joined Hisab Kitab in January 2019. And then after that, I basically created my own future plan, and which was a future vision for Hisab Kitab. And that vision included taking the product global. And we always thought about scaling rather than growth. So for that, we thought of partnering with big giants like Temenos and local banking solution providers, which we have accomplished. We are now on Temenos Exchange. Temenos, for those who are listening, Temenos is the gold standard, if you will, for the banking customers. And Temenos have around 3,000 banks. They have, they have their presence in 150 plus countries. So for me, it was always that in order for us to scale, we have a dream to conquer the world, but at the same time, we have technological challenges, which means that there's always so much going on. The advancements are unparalleled today than ever before. So we wanted partners that can increase our reach, take us to different parts of the world, and also help us with the technological challenges. So so we found Temenos, we found other partners. There's Software Group that we partnered with. So there are basically like the whole idea for Hisab Kitab was to grow. So now I'll go back to your question. Where did this Hisab Kitab come from? So there is an innate need in every household to keep their financials, in check, right? So previously, if we go back in time, we had our mothers, we had our adults or elders, like they were doing this bookkeeping, or you can say like maintaining the financials of the household in the form of a diary. That basically evolved into when the Excel sheet started coming out, the people started maintaining those ledgers in Excel sheet. Then the next evolution was naturally going to be on the mobile side, because everything like e-commerce became m-commerce, internet banking became mobile banking. So naturally this evolution was to be followed in the space of financial management as well. So we came up with the idea of this solution, this application, which is called Hisab Kitab, and the name by itself says Hisab Kitab. So for those who are listening to us and don't know the language, it means bookkeeping. So basically, then the first iteration of Hisab Kitab came out, then started reaching out, because it was available on Google's Play and App Store. So it started reaching different parts of the world. We reached around 160 plus countries globally, and we had like 700,000 plus users who clocked in around 13 million plus transactions. So that was a big success. So now this success had to be taken to the next level. So because so if we were providing solution in this way, our customers had to manually enter everything, every transaction that they were performing. So in order for us to facilitate our customers or our end users, the game is all about customer experience. So if we wanted to facilitate our end users, we had to partner with banks. So for working with banks, we evolved into our product into a white label solution for the banks. And luckily for our first customer was Habib Bank Limited, and which followed by three more banks in Pakistan. And as we speak, mashallah, like we have around 50 plus banks that we are speaking with globally. And hopefully this will be the second truly global product going out in the market.
I have few follow-ups on that. So Hisab Kitab does mean bookkeeping, but just for the clarification purposes, this is not a business bookkeeping app. It's a personal finance app. So it's budgeting, personal finance and budgeting. So so when you say like it's a white label product that you work with banks on, if someone in Pakistan downloads this app and fires it up, so can they connect their bank account and download all the transactions, or is there some additional steps they need to take in order to get all the transactions in the app?
First of all, thank you so much for clarifying that it's a personal financial management, because I think I missed this point. The second thing is, when we say white label solution, it means that we are offering it to the bank. So it is embedded in the bank's digital banking experience. So which means that we provide SDK to the banks that gets integrated with their mobile banking application, and seamlessly it appears in their banking application. So it is only after you sign into their mobile application that you'll be able to access Hisab Kitab, which is white labeled now for the bank. So it is no more Hisab Kitab. It basically, it could be called money management, it could be called budget, it could be called anything, and now it is residing within the bank's digital banking experience. So, there are some regulations, if you will. So, there are some countries where the central bank allows the banks to integrate the data with the third party application. Whereas, like, there are countries in which central bank have not yet allowed. They are moving towards that direction. So, for most part of the countries where we exist, this integration with the bank accounts or open banking is not yet a reality. So for those customers, we basically, like, if you're using the bank's application who are our customers, 85% of all your transactions are going to be automatically coming into Sapta. Whereas, like, if you're talking about the consumer app that we have out there in the Google's Play and App Store, that's not integrated with the bank's data.
I would need to manually enter the data, right? That would be the case.
Yeah. So now, and this is a bigger challenge. So when you're talking about any manual data entry or transaction, you have to be the best in the custom experience and the user experience of the UI, the front end, of the application. So the reason why we first spent like 3 years with the consumer app, with the customers who were manually doing it, was to learn from them, because your customer is the best teacher that you have. So we were able to convert, basically create user experience in such a way that only in 3 clicks a user can record a transaction.
Have you, so I'm just going to draw from my experience. This is something very, for me, it would be like not something that I would do personally. That's because I'm so used to, so I've been using Mint for the longest time. It's in
Yeah.
the US. So any app that I download, let's just say there's a new app that comes to the market, and I usually try to download it and take it for a spin and see how it is. I'm able to, directly use something like Plaid to connect all my information. Just enter my passwords and everything, and all the data is then imported to the app. Is there a solution that could be built by you or by someone else that is similar to Plaid, given the current regulations that exist, without changing anything?
So Plaid is an option itself that's available to us. So Plaid provides APIs, and you integrate your app through Plaid APIs, and which enables the customer to enter their credentials. And because see, the open banking world considers the data to be the property of the end user, not the bank. So you can import your data in any third-party application using Plaid or any other open banking solution provider. So when you talk about the open banking solution provider, there are two parts of it. One is the API that you mentioned, which is Plaid, which basically helps you bring the data in. Then there is another service which is data aggregators are there, right? So you have to subscribe to them as well. We are in discussions with Mastercard. We are in discussion with other folks, and hopefully, we'll be providing the solution. So from the technical perspective, it's not a rocket science. There are available avenues that we can utilize. It's more of a central bank's decision to allow or not to allow.
For me, like the fact that someone has to, manually enter data, that would be like a very friction. There's a lot of friction
Yeah.
there. So for me to use the product continuously, it would need to be something that's automated, that I, look at it once in a while and it tells me it's my net worth and all those, other, data points that it can show me, telling me how my financial situation is. So where do you see with the current environment and how things are, where do you, like you mentioned about scaling, so how do you feel scaling in the current environment where fintech might be looked at? Or I mean, I would put your Hisab Kitab under the fintech category. So it would be looked at most likely as something that, like, yeah, everyone is doing it, but like, we should be cautious because things can change overnight. So how are you approaching scaling right now?
So luckily, we are in the era, I would say. So it all started with fintechs. First, banks wanted to be banks, and fintechs wanted to be fintechs, and then banks started being fintech, and fintech started being banks. So this is where we are right now. So luckily for us, now we are in the space where both space are respected, and both space are kind of, you can say, these are focus space, no more everyone trying to do everything. So I'll give you an example, and again I'll quote Temenos. Temenos is the biggest banking solution provider globally. As I said, there are 3,000 banks all across the world, and they are present in 150 plus countries. Temenos came up with an excellent idea. They thought, and this is how they embraced the fintechs. They thought rather than developing everything themselves, they need to create a marketplace where they need to bring the qualified fintechs into that marketplace. And luckily, Hisab Kitab is one of them. What they started, so there is a sense of collaboration where Temenos is going to focus on their core, which is core banking solution and the digital banking solution. By the way, for the digital banking solution, there was a solution called Kony, which Temenos acquired. Now you have core banking, then you have digital banking, and for everything else, they have their Temenos Exchange, which is the marketplace, where they have partner solutions present there. So similarly, the way I see it is that most likely, in my understanding, fintechs are going to be more focused than being generic. So I'll explain what I mean by saying that. So for Hisab Kitab, for example, there is a bit of development that needs to happen in security and authentication, right? there is a bit of development that is required for, say, digital banking solution. There is a requirement which is for open banking solution. There is a requirement for personal financial management. There is a requirement for core banking solution. So, if I am in such an ecosystem where, for the other things that I require, I have partners that I can work with, then it helps me focus on my own core area, which is personal financial management. So, as a product company to scale, I will be focusing on my core. And for the context, I will be partnering with others. So, as you rightly mentioned, Plaid as one of the players for open banking. Well, so if Plaid has done something, then why would I go and do this, repeat the same thing? I would utilize them. So back to your question, so in this space where banks and interestingly, I'll share with you that there are some banks that I've come across that they also have their development wings, and they are trying to be fintech themselves, and they are trying to develop new product, new services within the banks. So I think that the trend which I'm seeing already is going to be focused more on fintechs being fintech, focusing on their core and leaving the context to other partners.
You probably have a lot of you're dealing with a lot of developers, and you either have an in-house team or maybe you're outsourcing it. So how does that work for your team in terms of how do you manage so you're working you so you, I would say you're working under an umbrella corporation, right? So you have lots of freedom in terms of you might not be as constrained about budgets. You might not have a certain requirement to reach certain profitability right away because it's a white label service. And when you're selling B2B, the hope is that one day you will be able to scale and charge a premium for the services you provide. But in the meantime, you will probably not have that much issues in terms of how do you scale, how do you hire. So what is your approach? Are you focusing more on the user interface, or are you focusing more on the tech side of things?
Yeah. So being part of a big organization like JBS, it definitely helps, and it does not help from financial point of view only, but also from the guidance and experience that people in the organization have. For example, I'll mention Wakar Islam again. He is the CEO of JBS, and director of JBS. He has held positions in global organizations. He was leading the in a leading position globally, right? So with someone like him, you get a first-hand chance to go and discuss things, to ask for advices, to make best use of his own experience, right? So that is, I think, that's a more valuable thing that I see more than the financials. We do have financial pressure, so it does not mean that if you're housed within JBS that we don't. So we do have that. We do have budget constraints for hiring resources, and and we have to live with that. When you ask about the user experience or the tech side, I think there is no more differentiation between the two. So user experience is critical, but tech side is the one who makes this user experience a reality. So when we are hiring resources, my consideration is always both of them.
When you're hiring, so what are you looking for in people who you want to come work for you? Are you so I know I've spoken to a lot of founders, startup founders. So their pitch is of course a little bit different than maybe yours because you're not technically a startup. So what is it that you feel maybe might have attracted someone to work for you, or is that the problem that you're solving, or is it more about working for a brand name? So what is it?
I think basically, I would say that if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So by all means, we are startups, even though we might be housed within JBS, but the way we act, the way we manage ourselves, we are a startup. Even though we do have this leverage, you are right, that if anytime anything goes wrong, we do have some place to go, and that is why you might be seeing that we have been offered funding, we have been offered many things, and we are not going that route because our route is completely different. We are focused on revenue more than funding. So, that's a different game plan. of a startup. So the see like what I have seen over the years, like past 3 years since I've 4 years, 3.5 years since I've been part of Hisab Kitab, it is the culture that basically attracts most of the people. And the culture of kind of being exposed to new things that you want to do in life, the culture of being so before even COVID, I started asking my team to work from home. So this might be something the world has adopted later after the COVID hit, but like for Hisab Kitab, it was something that it was from the very and initially like team was hesitant to work from home. So I forced the team to take one day, mandatory one day, work from home once in 2 weeks. And in that day, my ask was that you go back home. And when you're home, you don't get yourself absorbed in the operational issues. Rather, from the ground floor, which is the operational issue, I want you to go to the ninth floor and look down upon your ground floor and see where what improvement can you bring in what you're doing. So to answer your question, the biggest attraction that I found that people join Hisab Kitab is number one for the culture. Number two, what kind of things we are doing in terms of technological advancements. Number three, this aspiration of going global. So now, especially more than ever before, now that we have partnered with Temenos, we are now very close to closing few banks globally, and so a lot of our resources which are in the market will be attracted because of this exposure that they can get in Pakistan. And I'll remind you that our when we're talking about global, we are talking about our customers being in US dollars, which means that if a company is basing its revenue on dollars, then your employees also feel secure that any local change or in the economy would not hurt them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, how many employees would you say you have right now? Like, how big is your team?
So we have around 24, 25 people.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about remote work. So remote work is a funny thing because right now in the US, especially, the trend is to get people back to like offices because real estate is a very expensive here, and a lot of companies want to see like their offices full. So what I find interesting is like the younger you are, the more you want to be in the office. And the older you are, you rather work from home. So yeah, so I find myself in between. I go into the office like couple of days a week, and most of the time I'm working from home. So it's kind of a good mix. But given what Pakistan has faced in the past couple of years in terms of startup funding and all that, so is there more of a are more of your employees young enough to be like, you know what, I want that fancy coffee machine, I want that fancy swag, or I want that fancy things or perks that come with startups? Is that the expectation of common applicant that is applying, and is this something that you have to tackle or figure out how to address it?
Yeah, I think, and as an employer, you need to preempt those things. Not that they expect it, you need to create that environment. So as I said, like the culture and the environment is what attracts the youngsters the most. And when we talk about, I hope like next time you're in Pakistan, I would love to give you a visit of our office. So it is very, you can say, futuristic in the sense that there is an area which is there for relaxing and for people to go and chill out. They have different games and different activities there. There is an area where we have created silo booths where if you want to focus, you can just get into those silo booths, and these are soundproof, so you can focus on things that you want to focus on. There are collaboration areas. There are different teams, right? So our aspiration is to become in terms of the culture and environment to come close to, I would say, Google, which is always being used as a standard, or you can say like inspiration for the culture, right? When it comes to work from home or work from office, a lot of people or a lot of trends are set by the leaders. So recently, Elon Musk said that he wants to bring all the employees back to the office. So you will hear a lot of people talking in favor of bringing back the folks in the to the office, right? So I think like for every company, they need to look into what basically makes the most sense for them. So for Hisab Kitab, it's right now, and it has always been, it's a hybrid lifestyle. So you basically would find people that they work from home, say like 2 3 days, and for 2 days they would come for collaboration, or if there is an important pitch that they need to give, so they'll all be in the office. The office is there for them, but it's going to be for Hisab Kitab, it's going to be a hybrid model. But most importantly, I think the underlying principle is more important than the action of working from home or from the office. It is the trust and enablement that needs to happen. So whether you are in the office or you are from home, so the whole culture of Hisab Kitab is delivery based. So our focus is only delivery.
You talked about culture, and I know you mentioned initially when we started our conversation about working at KPMG and other places. So I am also one of those people who worked at KPMG. So when you went back to Pakistan after working at all the different places in different countries, culture-wise, is there a difference in, because I hear a lot of off the record, I hear a lot of people tell me that the work ethic when it comes to employees in Pakistan is a little different than what we face in other countries. So is there a lot of difference? Is it more exaggerated? Is there a new generation that is a little bit different than the previous generation? What have you faced? What is your observation?
So Hisab Kitab is the first company that I'm working in Pakistan. So as I said, like I've never lived or worked in Pakistan, so Hisab Kitab was the first one. Luckily, I was in a position to basically define the culture of Hisab Kitab. So I did not have to live the existing culture, rather define it, right? So I'll give you my own experience. The first day of my work, I was led to my office, which was uh, a traditional Pakistani office where I had a big table, I had a chair with a high back, and there were two chairs which were with the low back, and there was a bookcase, and it was almost like an office of a government bureaucrat, right? So the first thing after going in that office, I realized that this is not my office. It cannot be my office. I'm a startup. I'm trying to be closer to my team, and this kind of environment will just create this gap between me and the team. So the first thing I did was I went to HR and I asked them to remove all the furniture from the office, turn this into a conference room kind of setup with a TV and a glass wall to write on. And then I from the there was there was my nameplate which was at the door, so I changed it to call it HK room, which was a Hisab Kitab room, right? So this kind of culture does exist. There is I would say, like, if I relate it to the Western culture, let's say you are based out of US, you're based out of Canada, right? There is why are these economies or these countries more successful? Because they create leaders, you know and in Pakistan, there's still this mindset of controlling the employees, and you see employees as someone you're paying, right, for their services. Whereas in the US or in Canada, they consider you that in future you could very well be one of the owners of the company. So there are some available options for the stock options. You grow if you have the potential, and you make it to the to that's why it's called the dreamland. It's a land of opportunity because you can achieve those things there, right? Whereas in Pakistan, now the trend has started. Now the new companies, or you can say, those companies which are led by, visionary people, they are giving out stock options. They are giving out stocks, equity in their company for, people who are joining them. But there's still a lot needs to be done. So I'll just remember that my nephew was working for Chobani, that yogurt brand. So the owner
I
of
love it. I
Chobani,
love that.
yeah.
I
So
love that
who doesn't,
yogurt.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, see, like you said, you love it, and I said I loved it. So the reason why we say that is because we like the yogurt, right? But even in that yogurt, if you see the story, what I'm going to tell you now, you would know why we love that yogurt. It's very important. So this guy, when he became rich, I would say, like when he made it, so the first thing he did was that he invited like all his people who have been with him for, and no matter if you are the operator in the factory or if you are someone who's higher up, so invited those people who were very loyal to him for these past those years where he needed them, and he offered them not only stock options but he also gave them some cash dividends, right? So, then imagine why Chobani became Chobani is not because only they were focusing on yogurt. They were focusing on making the people who are working in Chobani feel proud of why they're working for Chobani. So I think that culture needs to still come to Pakistan. And here, the way people look at things is still not as I would say like as good as it is in US or in other parts of the world. Over there they actually see you as a potential for becoming a leader, and no one holds you back, right? Over here, still, there is a change that has come, which is very positive. But majority of the organization, they still have those structures where you, at best, are the employee.
Treating employees well is like one of the, of course, that's the way to basically ensure that your product is actually what it is. But the funny thing is, you mentioned Tesla and Elon Musk asking people to come back to the offices and also announcing layoffs at the same time. But then again, while I was at KPMG, one of my clients was Tesla. And so we used to help them out with certain things. I have never dealt with more miserable people at any other company than Tesla.
Then
Uh,
Tesla.
yeah, because the team there, the accounting team that I dealt with, was so miserable that I can't explain it to you how miserable they were. Like they were under constant pressure, working 80,
Yeah.
90 hours a week. And so there is a certain environment that he's created. And for that reason, I would call him a little bit unconventional from Silicon Valley ethos of like, laissez-faire kind of approach to things where, the CEO and CFO and everyone is sitting on the same floor and like there's no offices and all that stuff. So he still has maintained a certain level of hierarchy. And for that reason, I feel like given his scale, he needs people in the office. But yeah, it's definitely not the norm. A lot of companies here are still having employees work from home and basically giving them an option, right? Like if there are certain teams always that will require in-person communication or interaction, and then there will always be teams that don't need that. My team is one of those teams where we do need to talk every couple of weeks about certain projects you're working on, but it's not required for us to do our jobs every
Yeah.
single day in the office. You mentioned startups, right? So you treat yourself, you have a soul of a startup basically. So
Yeah.
what other startups in Pakistan do you look at as doing great work, or what products of any startups that you are personally using?
I'll give you another. I think this is because of the grooming in the US that we had. That you always look at things as opportunities rather than challenges. So when I moved to Pakistan to head Hisab Kitab, the first thing I did was that I reached out to organizations who were obvious, you can say, competitors to us, right? And I saw, because my thought process has always been to collaborate with people, with companies, because that's where the best comes out. So I, reached out to TPS, I reached out to Avanza, I reached out to NDC Tech. These are all those companies who were providing solutions to the banking customer. So the first thing I heard from everyone was that we can also do PFM, and why should we partner with you, right? And then once I sat down with them and I made them understand that, see, like you have so many other things that you can focus on. I have only one focus, which is PFM. So let's work together. So fortunately, like when we are talking about Pakistan, in the context of Pakistan, any company that is providing solution to banks, we have partnered with them. Not only partnered with them, we have a product integrated with them. So that is also, by the way, this was the mindset of scaling Hisab Kitab. So rather than competing with them, we were collaborating with them. So in terms of startups in Pakistan, the trend has been, so there are many startups. I wouldn't name any one, but there are many startups who are doing really great. And you might have seen the rise of funding in Pakistan in the startups. So that is one area that I would say that funding is a liability that all the startups should take it with a pinch of salt, because then you're more liable in it. But as if I'm running a startup, I have needs, I have bills to pay. So if that, or I have ambitions to fulfill in a short span of time, so funding for that kind of startup is good. But I personally am not impressed by any company if they're having if they have been funded heavily. So it's a good measure for some folks, but for me it is the revenue. So how much revenue are you able to generate?
Basically you're saying value creation over valuation, right? Like they are
Yeah,
chasing, a lot of
exactly.
startups might be chasing, a lot of startups might be chasing valuation instead of trying to increase value. And I think they are the ones that will be struggling in the next few months, because they'll have a hard time raising follow-on funding,
Yeah.
given the environment has completely changed. I'm not in Pakistan, so I've always wondered about things like how are people feeling in Pakistan right now in terms of the inflation and how things are politically, as well as there are certain things that are happening in terms of the economy and all that. So where do people stand? What's the mood?
So people are scared, being honest, and especially I would classify people into few groups. So there are the super rich, who basically will get a dent in their extra wealth that they have. Then there are professionals who are earning fairly good, right? So they again might have to give some luxuries that they have, or they might continue and not save that much, right? Then you come below that level, then there are people who are basically they don't have any saving, but they will alter their lifestyle to suit the 40%, 30% inflation that hits us, and give up on few habits or activities that they were doing otherwise. Then you come to the group, which is the group that is going to be hurt the most, and those are the people who basically had their income, and everything from their income was going to necessities. So I went to get this oil change at Honda dealership, and interestingly, I was sitting there, and I overheard two people who were basically the mechanics over there talking about this, uh, petrol price hike, right? So they were discussing it, and one of them said that I earned like 20,000 rupees, and I was paying 100 rupees per day for my for the petrol for my bike, and now I'll have to pay 160 rupees. So it's going to be from 3,000. It is going to go up to 5,000 or 6,000 rupees per month. He said like everything that I had left from paying for the petrol was going towards rent, towards electricity payment, towards food, towards child education. So he said like I don't know how am I going to cope with it. So it is hard time for the lowest strata of the society, and all the I personally think that this is a time when the organization needs to be more than focusing on the bottom line or the net profit. They should be focusing on making the lives better for the people. And if, for example, the inflation is that high, what can organizations do to make sure that their people are, if they cannot remove the total impact, what can they do to improve the situation which is currently existing? So I know some companies who are software houses who are billing their customers in dollars, right? What they have smartly done, and I appreciate what they have done, is that they have linked the gross salary of their employees, even though the gross salary are paid in Pakistani rupees, but they have linked it to the dollar. So, they said that your gross salary, for example, is 204,000 rupees, for example, then it means that you are earning $1,000, right? So now, if the inflation even hits, you still get paid $1,000, whatever the amount is in Pakistan. So there are some smart things that people are doing, but I think, like, in general, as people, as humans, you know, and as corporations in Pakistan, the biggest liability, or the biggest responsibility, lies on the decision makers at the organizations where people are working. This is not the time to think about profit only. This is the time to think about people.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really nice talking to you. And thank you for being on the Misaal podcast. Best of luck with Hisab Kitab. And I'm pretty sure you'll do wonderful things.
No, thank you so much for having me here. I heard a lot from my marketing team about your, Misal episodes, and I see that you have been able to bring in, all the people who matter, that people would like to listen to. So thank you for creating a forum like this, and especially because you're not in Pakistan. I think one of the things that you do bring in your questions is some kind of advice also for the people who are participating as guests. So there's a different perspective that I was discussing with you. Trust me, if I'm talking to someone who's totally based out of Pakistan, who have never had the exposure outside, there are so many things I might not have even said. With you, I felt comfortable knowing your background, that I knew that you would relate to it. I knew that you would talk about, for example, when I mentioned Elon Musk's decision to bring people back in, you were very open and candid about your experience at KPMG doing some auditing work for Tesla, and saying that this is how you saw it, right? So I would otherwise, as they say, like, if you're playing tennis, you play according to the other person who's playing against you. So if it was a good discussion, it was because I was discussing it with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for listening to the Misaal podcast. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and will thank me by writing a review or sharing it on social media. Make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again. See you soon.